Welcome to day 6. Today's project is BMI calculator. What we will be doing is building a command line interface CLI tool in Rust to calculate the body mass index, which is BMI, based on the user's weight and height. Now, this project will improve your skills in user input handling, where you will be accepting and validating numerical input. Your mathematical calculations, where we'll be performing arithmetic operations. Your string parsing, converting user input into numeric types. Error handling, where we will be managing invalid inputs gracefully. And conditional logic, where we will be interpreting BMI ranges. So let's get started. To start off, I have already created a folder day 6, that's where it's located. So I'm going to go ahead and say cargo new BMI underscore calculator. And then once it's created, I'm going to say cd BMI underscore calculator. I'm going to open this project right here inside my Sublime text. So it's open and available. I'm going to go inside my main.rs file and delete everything for now. And then first, let's understand the BMI formula. Now the BMI formula, I'm going to go comment out stuff and say BMI is calculated based on weight in kgs, let's say, divide by height square, which is meter in meter squares. So whatever value we get out of this BMI, you are underweight if BMI is less than 18.5. This is underweight. You are normal weight if BMI is somewhere around 18.5 to 24.9. You are overweight if the BMI is greater than or in the range of 25 to 29.9, then you're overweight. This is normal. And then you are obese if the BMI is greater than or equal to 30. So this is obesity. Let's call obesity. So these are the different values. So BMI is weight in kgs divided by height height squared. That's what will give us BMI value. This is meter square and this is kgs. So let's go ahead and write the code for this. So I'm going to save this first. So let's get our libraries first. I'm going to go and get stdio for input output. Then I'm going to create my main function here. Inside my main function, let's first print a message to the user. We're saying BMI calculator and a calculator emoji over there. And I'm going to say, please enter your weight in kilogram. That's what I'm going to ask. I'm going to welcome the user here to the BMI calculator and prompt them to input their weight. So I'm going to do something different here. I'm going to read and parse user's input, which is weight and height, but I don't want to do the read line twice. So I'm going to just create a function called as get input as f64 and write that function later. But first, I'm going to say let weight equal to match, and I call that function. What this function does is it gets user's weight and also height and puts it inside this particular, gets it from that function. And I'll check if the value is valid. If not, invalid input for weight, please enter a valid number and close the function. And similarly, I'm going to do same for user's height. I'm going to say enter your height in meters, call the same function, some value, and then check if it's valid. If it's valid, if it's not valid, I'm going to give the error message and I will say please enter a valid number. Next step, I'm also going to validate user's height. So if height equal to 0, I will say height cannot be 0. And you can kind of validate both weight and height this way, but it's up to you however you want to do it. I just want to show you a validation step here. Next step, I am going to say let BMI equal to calculate BMI and pass it weight and height. So instead of doing the calculation here, I wanted to make the code more modular. So I created a function called as calculate BMI, where I pass the weight and height, and that will tell me what the BMI is. So that's where the calculation happens. And then I'm going to print your BMI is, give up to 2 decimal places and pass the BMI there. So now next step is I'm going to classify based on the BMI as I mentioned above. So as you see here, depending on what the BMI is, I want to check if the person is underweight, normal, overweight, or obese. So let's go ahead and call this function called as classify BMI, and I get the pass the value of BMI to that, and that function will do my classification and give me back the category. And I'm going to say BMI category, are you overweight, underweight, whatever it is, I'm going to get that back here and close this. Now let's go ahead and implement those functions. First one is get input as F64, which returns back optional 64. This says that if there is a value, it will give back. If no value, then it will tell you that this is not a right arrow, but it will not crash. So I'm going to go ahead and say let mutable input string new IO std in, and I'm going to say read line, pass the input to that, and if it fails, I'm going to say fail to read input, and I'm going to say match input dot trim parse F64. So if it fails here, it will go through that option of none and it will say invalid input for height, or it will say not failed to read error. Again, I'm going to check here, trim parse, and then check the value. And since there's no variable here, this will be what returned back to whoever calls it, which is weight and height. And that will be assigned, this value that we get here will be assigned to weight and height. Again, if you see, it is converted into F64 and is assigned to weight and height. Now our next function, which is calculate BMI. It takes the input of weight and height and then returns back an F64 depending on the BMI that we calculate. Again, the formula for BMI, as I mentioned, weight divided by height square. So I'm going to say weight divided by height times height and then pass it back. Next one is calculate BMI. In this particular case, I'm going to create a static variable reference to the string, and that's what is passed back. Now, if a BMI is less than 18.5, underweight is what is passed back. If is between 18.5 and 24.9, based on these formulas here, I'm going to say normal weight. If it's about 25.25 and 29.9, in between that is overweight. Else the person is obese. So that's what is given back from this classify BMI function. So that kind of takes care of our project. And again, what we did here is we created this main function, we gave the user the menu, we got the weight and the height using the same function get input as F64, which does is reads the standard input read line function from the terminal and gets us the value and assigns it to weight and height. Then we do some validation just for height right now to check if height is 0, because BMI we don't want to divide by 0. That's the major reason I did that. But again, you can do different types of validation here. And then I say let BMI equal to calculate BMI, weight and height, and print that. And then I say category equal to classify BMI, and I print the category. Again, category is overweight, underweight, normal weight, or obese, whereas BMI is the number that we get, and BMI is calculated here, weight divided by height square, and classify BMI depending on which range it falls in, we return back the right value back to the function that called it, which is here category. Now that we have it, let's save this, go back to our terminal, I'm going to clear it out and say cargo run. And there you go. Please enter your weight in kilograms. So my weight is, let's say, 89 right now. Please enter your height in meters. So I'm going to say I am 3 meters tall and your BMI is 9.89, you're underweight. Let's see, I think I'm not 3 meters long. Let's try again. I am 89 and I am 1.2 meters long. That gives my BMI to 61.81, which makes me very obese. Not right either. Let me run again. I can say my weight is, let's say, 55 kgs and my height is around 2 meters. And then my BMI is 13.75. I'm underweight. Let's increase a little bit more. I'm going to say 70 and I'm 2.4. That gives my BMI to 12.15. Even though my weight is increased, my height is also increased. So that's why it reduced it. But again, you can enter your values and then check your BMI here. If you give some errors, let's say I say A, it says invalid input for weight. Please enter a valid number, and I have to run it again. So there you go, gracefully handle that exception, and that's kind of covers our project of calculating BMI here. I hope you were able to follow along and get through this. But if you had any problems or issues or have any questions, let me know. Some of the things that we did here, you have to remember, is user input parsing. We read that using input output std in and parse and for safe input handling, but we made sure that we did it in a separate function. Mathematical calculations, we applied the BMI formula. We also did the conditional logic for implementing BMI classification, and we did the error handling across different regions where we managed invalid and edge cases inputs gracefully. So I hope you were able to follow along. If you have any questions, again, let me know in the messages and I'll get back to you.